Alright, so today we've got a gearbox or a motor. Most likely this motor up here. We'll just override it on so you can hear it. Now usually when it's that kind of grinding, it's the bearings in the motor. So unfortunately they had steel bolts on this one, so we're going to have to take the entire thing down to check. Because we can't get the bolts out of the back side. I tried on the other one, it just was a waste of time. So this belt here is tensioned up through this pulley over here. And that pulley is held on by these two bolts on the side up here. So we're just gonna loosen up those two bolts, and we may take them all the way out so that we can have enough slack to get that pulley off. So we'll do that, and then we'll come back.
All right.
All right. So these are those two bolts that hold on the pulley for the trolley belt. So we're gonna back them all the way off to where they're just barely on, and that way we'll have enough slack to get the motor and gearbox assembly off the other side. But we want to keep them on enough so that they don't actually pull through, because there is a lot of tension on that belt. Those were a 9/16 wrench. These are going to be 4/20s. So these will be 7/16. Stock set. So the motor gearbox is only held on by these four 7/16 bolts, or they're 1/4 bolts.
You got enough slack in there to get that out. Yeah.
Okay. So then, last time I had trouble getting these screws out also. So hopefully we can get those out without having to drill them out, so that we can get the wire for the motor out.
You might need an impact.
The problem is they're Phillips. And they're all seized. pull the, because this is a 3-phase motor, we're gonna pull the 4 wires out because you have your 3 hots, no neutral, and a ground. So we'll pull the 3 hots out and then
The guy this one?
right back. Alright, so you see all this corrosion in here? You know, I think that, you know, when the hole's not big enough in there to let this shit drain out, it just eats a lot. The other thing is when we go to mount this, we're going to mount with the box facing forward. Try and protect this thing a little bit. Every time the water sprays this way, it just goes up. So we're just loosen it up over here, and then we will unthread this one up. We just need to take the 7/16, 420 volts out over here. Since we have the other one starting to spin. Belt just come on down. Gotta get the angle. Our taper lock here, this is where the, you know, these pulleys have threads on one side, no threads on the other. So, you know, they thread in here and that pulls it up onto the taper lock. And then these here are threaded so that we can push the pulley off of the taper lock. So then, you know, these bolts just come right out. Now a lot of times these are fucked up just because they start to rust, so I always run a tap in there to at least get the first, you know, few threads going. And then to get the taper lock off of the shaft, you can put a screwdriver in there and then the whole assembly comes off. So now we can fix this snap ring that was broken also. So we'll put that. But before we go into all that, we will pull this last remaining bolt out. We couldn't get there because the pulley was in the way. So we'll get this guy out and then we'll be back. Okay, so now we got the motor gearbox separated from each other. So if we take the gearbox and spin it, I mean, this is a really low gear reduction or high gear reduction. So, you know, spinning this doesn't really spin that much, but this is nice and tight and there's no grinding at all. So, you know, then we go over to the motor and we can clearly hear it's the motor. But, you know, you just want to make sure before you know, replace this, that this isn't bad. You know, you don't want to be, I mean, this thing got fucked up by, you know, virtue of the screws not coming out, so we had to drill the plate cover off, you know, which is a pain. But, so this we were gonna have to get rid of either way, but at least the trolley, you know, those are usually that. So we will pull these steel screws out, replace them with stainless bolts, and we'll get our new motor and we'll come back. Things. Number one, we need to drill a couple holes in the bottom of this cover to let the water out. But before we do that, we just want to look at the nameplates here and make sure that they are the same. So, okay, so 0.5 horsepower, 0.5 horsepower. And then the other thing you want to check is the RPM, which is 1720, and this is also 1720. So we're good on that. So this one, I just reuse these because they don't seem to go bad. The plastic pieces here. So move that out of the way, and then we'll put a couple big holes in the bottom. The other thing we want to do is never seize this whole thing. Make sure we get it nice and never seized, so it comes apart. Now, the best thing about Washworld as a company is when you call them out on their bullshit, they actually fix the problem. So, you know, when I told them that they gave us steel bolts in these, they sent us a whole bag of the right ones. I mean, I had to buy the ones for the other one that I replaced, but they knew the exact size, and they just gave us what we needed. So we got the bolts here. We just got to drill these holes. You know, the small holes seem to get clogged up with shit. The other thing is we need to never seize these screws because they didn't seem to be never seized. So I'm just taking the cover off before I drill the holes so that we don't drill into any wires. That's an open case motor, so you got to make sure you get all those filings out of there. That looks pretty good. So we'll just leave the case off for now. This is the way that is oriented up on the machine, and we want our motor to be facing this way. So I think it's easier to put it together down here than it is up there. about this over the weekend.
Yeah. I'm still videotaping all this.
So those are all tight. If not, the shaft will just drift back and forth, right? You see it? So when that's drifting back and forth, our counterprops over here on top of this foamer, that's what reads the trolley moving back and forth. So you can come in sometimes and you'll just have this arm like all the way against here, and it won't be moving. It won't have counted, or it'll just continue driving that way until there's a VFD fault. It's motor run on, it usually says. That's because this thing isn't counting, usually. And the reason that one isn't counting is because this shaft is moving in and out, and it can't be read by that proc, because this wheel here, as this wheel spins, that proc sense counts each time it sees the gap in between this sprocket here. And so when that happens, we just need to get new Alright, so now that we got the right snap ring back in, this shaft won't move in and out, so we should be getting good readings on our procs up there. Now we just need to get the new sprocket, or new pull. So pull these bolts out of this. So we're gonna put the old taper lock right back on where it was. So order of operations here is just get these bolts back out. So those are our 3 bolts, those are our 3. Here's our keyway, we need this. And then we just need to pound this screwdriver back into the, usually I'll put this Alright, so we got that in, we got the keyway down, and she slides right up. there's a, on the inside you can see where the old one used to sit. There's like a line of rust right in there. So we just want to line the taper lock up right there and pull our screwdriver out. And then if we just flop this on its side here, you'll see that the sprocket has threaded holes. It's probably easier to see on this one, but the sprocket has threaded holes here and then open holes here. So we want to go into the threaded holes. So we line these threaded holes up with our open holes here. So our taper lock, it's just, our bolt's just gonna go right straight through and then into the threaded part there. And then again, if we wanted to pull the pulley away from the taper lock, we just use the threaded side here into the face of that. So just gonna throw our lock washer back on. Never sees the shit out of these. We'll just snug this up. Like how tough that is. Really don't matter. Shouldn't be that tough. I mean, it may be because we ran these into the face, so like the first couple, when you use these screws to pull it off, like the first couple threads can get buggered up. That feels a lot better. So we'll pull this one out. That didn't feel right. There's too much resistance on that bolt. So we'll try that again. And keep tightening them, because as each time you tighten the bolt, it pulls this pulley tighter onto the taper lock. So the other bolts will just loosen up, and then you just keep going around until you are tight on all of them. And then it's not going to move anymore. Okay, so now we are going to put this back up, and we will go from there. This side, notice how this prox is now lit up because the metal's in front of it. I don't know if you can see that from there, but the lights on here are indicator lights. It's not always 100% accurate. Sometimes you'll come out and you'll see this lit up, but you'll go inside, you go to the input page and the input isn't lit up. So it's not like a foolproof indicator, but it's pretty good. So we got this all set back up. And then next we will go over, get the belt back on. Alright, so the belt, we gotta get it oriented back in the same way that we found it. Put this on. You may need to loosen up those bolts a little bit. The other thing that we can do is actually drive well, we don't have the wires hooked up yet, so we can't do that. So we'll back that up a little more, and then we'll get that sprocket on there. Worst case, we could loosen up the bolts and tilt the whole thing forward. But I'd rather do it over here. You just gotta be careful not to get too loose, because you need to be able to tighten it back up.
Oh yeah.
Now we got that on. We'll go back and tighten these, make sure we don't forget that.
So we're gonna make it like.
This side up because there's a tensioning nut on the inside. So once you get back to where that nut is, it's just going to stop. You're not going to be able to tighten it anymore. You see those nuts are right there. So that's good. Now we just got to get our wiring done. Alright, so now we just need to bring this wire in and around over here. So there is more slack because I did it on the other side. So we're just going to loosen that up. Hold the slack up and in, and then it's going to be kind of tight, but I just think it makes way more sense over here than it does over there. It's even easier to work on because you don't have to stand in between the belt. You've got, extra space here. So we're just going to throw our 4 wires in through the hole over here. Get our O-ring back on nice. So when you get the motors, this is how they're wired up. We're just going to put L1 here, which is black, L2 white here, and then L3 here. So we just have to take these nuts off and then screw, put the eyelets on, screw them back down, and then we put our ground right here. So we'll be back when that's done. Alright, so we got our 3 wires hooked up for our 3 hots, and then we got our ground landed up top. So before we put the plate cover back on, we're going to test rotation. So, do you have the remote, Paul? All right. So it may have timed out for manual mode, but hit trolley left. Okay. So it turned off. So hit the green button. Hit the bottom right button, the red one. Okay. Now hit trolley left just for like a second. Oh. So we are backwards. Okay, so our rotation was off. We were hitting trolley left and it was going right. So we're just going to switch the white and the red because they're the easiest two for us to get to. But in three-phase motors, if they're rotating the wrong way, you just need to change any of the two legs, provided that you don't have a high leg. If you have a high leg, you don't want to switch the high leg, you just want to switch the other two. But in this case, we don't have a high leg here, so we're just going to switch red and white, and then we'll try again. Okay, so we have our red and our white wire switched, and now our rotation on our motor should be correct, so we're just going to test it out.
Ready?
Charlie. Paul's going to hit trolley left. Go ahead. All right, so keep going. All right, so now it's actually moving left when we hit left, and then go ahead and hit right. And it's hitting right when we hit right, and it's stopping at the right time. If we had changed the dimension here and this got too far away and it wasn't counting, when we went to go home, it would just slam home and it wouldn't stop. So it stopped at home, it went left when we wanted left, it went right when we wanted right. So last step is just gonna be to put never sees on the screws for the plate cover, which is down there. We'll put that back up and then we'll button everything back together and then we're done.